The Last Light of Elysium, in the heart of an ancient untouched forest, where the trees stood like colossal guardians stretching up into the sky until their tops disappeared beyond the clouds, there existed a village known as Elysium. The villagers had lived there for centuries, nestled in perfect harmony with the surrounding wilderness. They had no need for the outside world. Everything they required was within their reach. The village was sustained by the Heartwood Tree, an enormous, mystical tree that stood at the center of Elysium. Its roots spread deep into the earth, connecting with every home, every garden, and every well in the village. It was more than just a source of life. It was the lifeblood of the entire community. The Heartwood Tree was revered as sacred. Legend spoke of its divine origins, a tree planted by a long-lost goddess who had gifted the villagers the power of eternal life. For centuries, its presence ensured the villagers remained untouched by age and illness, remaining youthful and vibrant as time marched on. The people of Elysium were immune to the ravages of time, but they never questioned why or how, for they knew only that as long as the Heartwood Tree stood, so would they. But one night, as the villagers prepared for their annual harvest festival, a celebration marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of a new cycle, the first ominous sign appeared. A low rumble echoed through the village, and the Heartwood Tree, once lush with life, began to tremble. Its enormous branches quivered, and its leaves, which had once gleamed like emeralds in the sunlight, began to wither and turn brittle. The bark cracked and sap, dark and thick, oozed from the splits in its trunk. The villagers, filled with dread, gathered around the tree, unsure of what to do. It was as if the tree itself was dying. For days, the villagers attempted every prayer, every ritual, and every plea to the gods they could think of, but nothing seemed to reverse the tree's decay. The very heart of their village, the source of their immortality, was slowly falling apart. Desperation crept through the village, and no one dared speak the unspoken truth, that if the Heartwood Tree fell, so would they. Among the villagers was a young woman named Lyra. She had always felt an unusual connection to the Heartwood Tree, a bond that went beyond the mere reverence of the people. From an early age, Lyra had been drawn to the ancient tree, often sneaking away from her chores to sit beneath its massive branches, her fingers tracing the bark as if trying to unlock its secrets. Her mother, a skilled healer, had shared with her the ancient stories of the tree's origin. It was said that the tree had been planted by a goddess who once walked among mortals, and that through the goddess's love and magic, the tree had granted the villagers immortality. But for Lyra, the stories always felt incomplete. There were pieces of the tale that seemed to be missing, things no one was willing to discuss. Why, she wondered, was such a gift given, and what had the villagers done to deserve it? Her heart stirred with a sense of dread and curiosity that she could no longer ignore. When the tree's condition worsened, Lyra could no longer stand by idly. She knew she had to find the truth, to uncover the cause of the tree's suffering, and if possible, save the village from the doom that seemed inevitable. She decided to embark on a journey into the forest, to seek out answers that might lie beyond the village's borders. Under the cover of night, when the moon was hidden behind dark clouds, Lyra ventured deep into the forest, armed with little more than her courage and determination. She followed an ancient trail, known only to those who had lived in Elysium for generations, leading to a forgotten temple, the long-abandoned shrine of the goddess who had once bestowed the gift of immortality. It was said that deep within the temple's walls, answers lay hidden, secrets buried for centuries. The forest was thick with darkness, and the path was treacherous. Twisted roots and thorn vines snaked across the ground, and the air was filled with the distant calls of creatures Lyra had never seen. But she pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest, driven by a force she couldn't explain. After hours of travel, she finally reached the temple. It was an eerie, silent place, overgrown with moss and vines, the stone walls crumbling and broken. In the center of the temple stood an altar, and on it an ancient book lay open, its pages yellowed with age. Lyra approached cautiously, her breath caught in her throat as she touched the book. As her fingers traced the faded symbols inscribed on the pages, a strange warmth enveloped her. She could hear whispers, soft and distant, that seemed to come from the very air around her. The words in the book began to shift and change, as if alive, and the truth began to unfold in her mind. The Heartwood Tree, it turned out, had not been planted by a goddess as the villagers had believed. Instead, it had been created by a group of ancient, mortal beings, immortal seekers who had longed to conquer death. They had discovered a forbidden form of magic that allowed them to extend their lives, but not without consequences. They had bound their souls to the tree, trapping themselves in its roots and branches, and in doing so, they had created the very tree that had granted the villagers their immortality. But over time, the magic had corrupted. The souls trapped within the tree had grown restless, yearning for release. The immortality they had once craved had become a curse, and now they sought to free themselves from the tree's grip, even if it meant the destruction of everything around them. Lyra's heart sank as she understood the terrible truth. The villagers' immortality had never been a gift. It was a consequence of a dark and twisted magic that bound their souls to the tree. The tree was dying because the souls trapped within it could no longer be contained. The villagers would die, but so too would the cursed tree. She knew what she had to do. To save the village, to end the cycle of suffering, she would have to release the souls trapped within the tree. But in doing so, the Heartwood Tree would fall, and with it, the immortality that had defined the villagers' lives for centuries. Returning to Elysium, Lyra gathered the villagers and told them the truth. They listened in stunned silence, their faces pale as they processed the revelation. Some were afraid, others angry, but in the end, they knew what must be done. Together, they watched as Lyra approached the Heartwood Tree one final time. With a whispered prayer, she broke the magic that bound the souls to the tree, releasing them to the afterlife. As the tree collapsed to the ground with a mighty crash, the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over the village. The immortality that had once defined them was gone, but for the first time in centuries, the villagers felt the weight of their mortality and the freedom that came with it. They were no longer bound by the curse of eternal life. They were truly alive, and so the last light of Elysium faded. But a new dawn began, one that would be marked not by the passing of centuries, but by the fleeting, precious moments that define true existence.